Oh my goodness, what a morning.
Amen.
It's a great day to be in the house of the Lord. Look at it outside. Can you believe it's February? As we continue in our series of sermons today, which is what? Do you remember? Don't look at your bulletin. Jesus' language of love. Talking about how Jesus speaks and how we need to follow his example in our speech. And how we show love, because that is the language of Christ. She wanted to share this with you. Some of the most humorous and enlightening moments in our lives center around eating and drinking. Story is told about a preacher at a church. After the sermon, they would always have coffee available. Now, see, we have ours before church. They had theirs after church because they enjoyed sitting around and fellowshipping and talking after the service. It seems that one Sunday, the preacher is sitting there with a young man talking and drinking a cup of coffee. And he says to the young man, he says, "Son," he said, "do you know why we serve coffee after church?" And the little boy thought for a moment, and he said, "I think I know, Pastor." He says, "Well, tell me, son, why do we serve coffee after church?" And he says, "It's to get the people awake before they drive home." Jesus shares something with us here in Scripture to wake us up. He wants people to be woken up with his language of love. In John 13:34, we read, "A new commandment I give unto you, love one another." Now, this was revolutionary, believe it or not, when Jesus was teaching. And when it comes to love, acts of service is a way of showing that love. Now, Dean Johnson, are you here? Dean Johnson, paging Dean Johnson.
No, I'm not here.
Well, come in here, Dean Johnson. Dean Johnson, I want you to come up here, Dean. When it comes to serving God and showing the love of God, Dean exemplifies this in so many ways, but one of the best ways, come over here, Dean, don't be afraid.
Is this going to be like the first compliment you ever gave me?
Who said I was giving you a compliment? But acts of service is a way of showing love. And Dean has been doing a wonderful job taking care of his mom. Dean is going to make somebody a good wife someday.
Oh, yes. Thank you for the compliment.
But he has been taking care of his mom for the last several weeks. And
Weeks? Months?
well, most recently with her illness, he's been taking care of her and being her nurse.
No.
So today we would like to show our appreciation and thanks to Dean.
Hey, that's the same shirt I got on today.
Thank you, Dean, for all your help, love, and support. You do a great job as a nurse, and that is love your mom.
Oh.
So, just for you, buddy.
I charge $40 an hour, buddy.
Jesus says to love. And one of the ways that he teaches us to love is through acts of service, through doing things for other people to show how much they mean to us. This week we're going to be looking at John chapter 13 to learn another way that Jesus shows us how to serve and how to love. This passage provides us with one of the most memorable times that Jesus spoke of the love language of service. As we look at this story, we're going to be examining three different aspects of service. First of all, within this passage, we see the act of service itself. In John 13, 3 through 5, we begin our story. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garment, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. To give you a little background as to what this is all about, it was customary back in Israel at this time that when you came into someone's house, you had a servant wash their feet. Now, the reason for that is because they would wear sandals, right? And they didn't have blacktop roads to walk on. They walked in the dusty roads. And their feet would get hot. And what happens when your body heats up? You perspire. And as you perspire, and that causes moisture on the feet. And as you're walking through a dusty road, what happens? The dust collects on the feet, and it gets all caked in there and gets all nasty between the toes. And it's just not very appealing, especially when you're sitting around a table eating supper, as they were doing. So Jesus, rather than have one of the servants go and wash the disciples' feet, he himself, the master, takes a basin of water and a towel, and he begins to wash the feet of the disciples that are there. Now, how would you feel if you were one of those disciples? The master, the one you look up to, the teacher, is down on his hands and knees washing your dirty, sweaty, stinky, toe-jam feet. Well, that's what Jesus did to show his love for them. When Jesus wanted to show them the full extent of his love, he served them. Now, sometimes we got a problem with that. How many of you would be willing to wash my feet? How many of you would be willing to show the love of Jesus, speaking this language of service? Sharon raises her hand that she would. What's that?
I'm a licensed manicure, and I have.
And you have, not mine.
No, not yours.
No, you're in for a surprise.
I know.
Well, Sharon, if I were to tell you that right back here, I have a basin of water,
Okay.
and I have a towel. If I told you that, I'd be lying because I don't. And I would not ask you to do that for me, but I thank you for your willingness to serve. Jesus was willing to do something that most of us would just be grossed out about doing. But he did it not because he liked washing feet, not because he looked forward to this job, not because he was saying, "Look at me, how wonderful I am." Jesus did it to demonstrate love. He says the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. He showed his love in action. Now, some people, that is their major love language, acts of service. That's mine. I show I love people by doing things for them. For Lisa, I'll wash the dishes, I'll wash the clothes, I'll shovel the driveway, I'll clean off her car in the morning and scrape the ice and warm it up for her so she doesn't have to. It's all ready. That's how I show love. And if people do those things for me, to me, that shows that they really love me. My son, Zach, the other day, I'm getting ready to go to bed, and Lisa has washed up dishes. And they're laying there, and they have dried on the sink. And they need to be put away. And her feet are hurting her from some problems she has with plantar fasciitis. So I told her to go on to bed. I'd take care of putting the dishes away. Well, I'm out there doing that, and Zach walks out in the kitchen. And without asking what he could do, he begins to take dishes and put them away, helping me. You know what? That meant the world to me. I actually did not have to ask my child to do something. He just did it. And to me, at that moment, of all three of my children, he was definitely my favorite. Acts of service to some people mean the world. That's how they show love, and that's how they hope to receive it. Jesus understood that. He wanted to show the disciples and show us that he truly loved them. He was willing to get down and do the job of a slave or a servant in order to demonstrate that kind of love. When we express our love through acts of service, we are giving people a glimpse of who Jesus is and how Jesus acts. Now, a few years ago, we had a program here, and Dean, do you happen to know where those art cards are? I couldn't find them anyplace. I don't know if they got given away. Do we still have some? Can you set those out for us today? We had cards made up. It said ARK, ARK cards. It has the church's name on it. It has information. And what we were asking people to do, and I'm going to reinstitute this today. If you'll take a few of those cards. ARK, ARK, stands for Acts of Random Kindness. And what I would like you to do is take some of those cards and just do something nice for somebody and not say a word about doing it. Maybe you're going through the drive-thru at McDonald's and you decide you're going to pay for the person's breakfast that's behind you. And you ask the cashier to give them this card. It just says on it that we're doing this because we love Jesus. And it shows people Christ in what we do, in our acts of random kindness, our acts of service. So if we want to show the love that Jesus has for us, the love that he showed for his disciples, his friends, the world, we're going to intentionally serve other people. That's the language of love when it comes to service, as Jesus demonstrates. Secondly, we see the response to service. In John 13, 6-11, we continue on the story. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? And Jesus answered him, what I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. And Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered Peter and said, if I do not wash you, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet, but my hand and my head too. And Jesus said to him, the one who has been bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but he is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, not all of you are clean. There are going to be people that you're going to want to try to help. You're going to want to try to serve that are going to act like Peter. Oh, no, don't do anything for me. I'm fine. I don't need your help. You know anybody like that? Look in a mirror. You may see somebody like that. I grew up in a household where my parents didn't want to accept help from anybody. They were raised that way. I was raised that way. And even to this day, it's hard for me to accept help and to ask for help because I was taught to be proud, that you need to do it on your own. You don't need anybody else. It shows weakness when you have to ask somebody to help you, to assist you, to be willing to let them wash your feet. Back in 1998, right before we moved here, I threw my back out. And I could not walk, I had to crawl to the bathroom. I could not take care of myself. I couldn't stand to take a shower. I even needed help when I went to the bathroom. And I'll tell you what, that is embarrassing if you've ever been there. That is humiliating. That was when I was at my lowest. And my wife, God bless her, took care of me for several weeks. I'm thinking, man, she must really love me. She must really care about me because she's serving me in this way. She's doing these things for me. And let me tell you what, some of the things she had to do in taking care of me would make washing feet look like a party. It was difficult. But I still remember everything she did to help me through that time, to serve me. But I didn't want to accept it. I did everything in my power to try to take care of my own problems because that's the way I was raised. Even the pain was so great, I still tried to power through it. But it got to the point I couldn't. You see, when it comes to service, some people don't want your help, or at least they say they don't. They're like Peter. Oh, Lord, you could never do that. You could never do that for me. And it could be because they respect you and they don't want you to go through that. Or it just could be they don't want to owe you anything. That's one of the ways I was raised. If somebody did something for my mom and dad, they had to repay them. No ifs, ands, or buts. It was either with cash or in kind. They had to do something to reciprocate that. They couldn't just receive the blessing. But see, that's what Jesus wants us to do. He wants us to love one another as He loved us. He wants us to give to one another, and He wants us to receive that type of love from other people as well. Some people will receive it humbly. They receive the love in a manner in which it was given. That's what I try to do. That's what we should all try to do. But some will reject it first, out of discomfort or out of false humility. They won't be appreciative because they're too proud to be served. Don't be that type of person. Do you realize when you do not allow someone to show them love to you through acts of kindness and acts of service, what you are doing is you are robbing them of a blessing? You're taking away their joy. You're taking away their blessing for wanting to show you love. How many of you, if a friend came up to you and said, I love you, man, they want to give you, what do? You go, get away from me. Don't touch me. Well, that's kind of what we're doing whenever someone wants to do something nice for us, or wants to serve us. We're saying, get away from me. No, I don't want your gift. I don't want your love. I'm too proud. I'm too good for that. We need to be willing to accept, and yes, sometimes even ask for help. See, that's what God's here for. That's what the church is here for, to show love. And one of the ways we show love is through service. Don't ever allow yourself to get to the point in life where you are suffering and ignoring other people's offers and damaging yourself and your family and your situation. This happens a lot whenever we're sick and we're going through illness in our family. I am so proud of this congregation. Jeff and I went over to see Carolyn yesterday and visit. And if you'll look in the bulletin, you'll see the thank you note that she put in. And I know she means that. People have shown her and Dean love. They have called, they have visited, they have sent food over. They've taken Dean away for several hours so that Carolyn doesn't have to deal with him. They have done all these things to show their love and appreciation. And I think that Carolyn really appreciates that, even though it may be hard sometimes to accept the help. Folks, we're a family here, and we need to love each other and be willing to help one another, but also be willing to accept one another's help. That's showing that we are willing to love through acts of service, either our own or someone else's. A man and his wife were awakened one morning at 3 o'clock, and the man gets up and he goes down to the back door, and standing there on the back porch in the pouring rain is this little drunk guy. And he said, "What do you want at this time of the morning? It's 3 a.m. He says, "Mister, I need a push." He says, "Get out of here. Just go someplace. I got to get up to work in the morning." And he slams the door. And he goes back up to bed. And his wife said, "Who is that, honey?" He says, "Oh, it's some little drunk out there. He wants a push. I told him just to get lost." She said, honey, that's not being Christ-like. You need to go downstairs and help that man and give him a push. Remember a couple weeks ago when we broke down and we had a couple guys stop to help us? And didn't you appreciate that? He said, "Well, yeah." So he starts feeling guilty, and he goes back downstairs. And he puts on his shoes, and he puts on his raincoat, and he opens the door, and the guy's gone. So he yells. He says, "Hey, buddy, you still out there?" He says, "Yes, sir, I still am out here." He said, "Do you still need that push?" He says, "Yep, I still need a push." He says, "Well, where are you?" He said, "Sitting out back on the swing." Sometimes people don't deserve our acts of service. They don't really deserve to be helped. But showing Christ's love through acts of service is still important. You know, none of us deserved Christ's help. Because of our sin, because of our rejection of God through our selfish actions of sin, none of us deserved Christ. None of us deserved his coming and suffering and dying on a cross for our sins to save us from damnation. But he did anyway. And we need to learn to have that type of love, that even if we think people don't deserve our help, we need to be willing to say, yes, I'm going to show my acts of love through service. Because in doing that, they may not accept it at first. They may not ultimately understand what this is all about, but you're going to show the love of Christ, and you may make a difference in that person's life. Thirdly, there's the motivation for service. Why do we serve? Why should we do this? John 12:17, or 12 through 17, Jesus said, when he had washed their feet and put his outer garments on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, "Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." What's our motive for service? We got to be careful, because sometimes we may do the right thing for the wrong reason. And to the Lord, the reason is just as important as the action. We don't want to be like the man who was walking along the beach and he found a genie bottle and he picked it up and he rubbed it, and this genie pops out and says, "Thank you, Master, for allowing me to come out." He said, "Because of your kindness and your goodness, I will grant you one wish." The man thought for a moment and he says, "You know, I wish that my brother would forgive me. You see, we had an argument 30 years ago, and we haven't spoken since. The genie says, poof, he has forgiven you. He says, now let me ask you, Master, why did you ask for your brother to forgive you? Is it because you're wanting to make your peace with him because you're dying? He said, oh my, no. He said, I'm not dying. My brother is. And he's worth $60 million. It was nice what the guy did, asking for his brother to forgive him. But what was the reason? If the guy had $60 in the bank instead of $60 million, would he have been as quick to use his wish on his brother's forgiveness? You see, Jesus was motivated by love to serve. He was motivated by love to his disciples to wash their feet, to show them how much he cared, to show them how much he loved them, that nothing was too much for him to do when it came to his love for them. But he also did it to show us how we need to love others. When asked what the greatest commandments were, Jesus said the greatest is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is likened unto it, love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, the two great commandments are love God and love people. And one of the ways he wanted to show that love is through service. Jesus demonstrated it time and time again. This was just one example. The motivation that Jesus had was love. And that needs to be our motivation when it comes to serving others. Not do it because we feel guilty, not do it because we feel we have to. It's our responsibility. Nobody else will do it, so I guess I will. Have you ever done something, an act of service for someone, with those motives in mind? Just so that they'll shut up, I'll do the task. I'll do what they ask. Well, that should not be our motivation. First of all, our motivation should be that of love. We do it because we love God and we love people. Jesus said, whatever you do for the least of these, you do unto me. When we serve that individual, when we do an act of kindness for someone, we're actually doing an act of kindness to the Lord. We're serving God through serving others. Also, we serve out of obedience because the Lord tells us we need to. Because we need to follow his example. We need to do what he says. And not just need to, but we should want to. We should want to. And also we need to serve out of the hope that those we serve will see Jesus through our lives and through our actions and through our service. Folks, you may be the only Bible some people ever read. You may be the only example of Jesus Christ that they'll ever see. And we need to continually show love to others through our service. Not be stingy, but we need to be very gracious. And we need to be open. And we need to be very liberal with our service and our love. As we close out here today, Matthew 25:40, the scripture says as our worship team comes, and the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did to one of the least of these my brethren, you did unto me. We may never know how powerful an impact we make on people's lives as individuals or people's lives as a whole. Our actions do speak louder than words. I can tell you all day long, I love you, I care about you, you're important to me, but if I never lift a finger to help you in a time of need, my words are meaningless. What does it profit? I like what one writer said. He said he overheard a mentally challenged young man say this: in this life, God places us in his oven. In here, it's hot and it hurts. No one likes being in the oven, but when life is over and the bell dings, God takes us out of the oven and says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." If we want to hear those words, "Well done," then we power through the tough times and we get past the unforgiving spirit and we get past the suspicious attitudes and the skepticism, and we're willing to get past the pride to open up and allow others to serve us as we allow ourselves to serve others. This is love.